Welcome into the OBR streaming network. This is the 53, as we will react to the Browns cut downs to the 53-man roster as it stands now. Certainly not final, but we have our first cut. There, 1,500 some guys available out there as teams all got to 53 at 4 p.m. today. Let's go around the horn and take a look at this beautiful panel of gentlemen that I have with me. First of all, the legend next to me, the one and only Fred Greetham, is with us. Jacob Roach, welcome, sir. Good to see you here. Sam Penix down here to my lower right, and that would be Pete Smith underneath me here. Good to see you all here. Let's go around the panel here. As we look at this 53, there certainly are some things out of place still, some things to be worked through before we get to this final 53. But let's get first reactions, and we'll start with Fred. Fred, first reactions of this 53-man roster. Browns keep 4 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 tight ends. There's still some things to be done out there. What were your first reactions, sir?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I wrote about. I mean, it pops out at you. I don't think anybody had them keeping all 4 quarterbacks. So it's obviously they feel like a deal can be made, listening to offers as teams shake out. Nobody believes that they'll have 4 on September 8th. But, yep, temporary thing. Obviously, I took videos showing Pierre Strong and Jerome Ford, the running back core, Jordan Akins, David Njoku, the tight end core. It's just very thin. But this is what happens at this time. I describe it's kind of like putting together a puzzle. Everything's strategic. They look at guys that they think nobody will claim, as opposed to guys that were drafted and other teams might have had on their draft board. And so they keep them, thinking other guys they want to get back on the practice squad will get cut or nobody claim, and then they put them back. So it is kind of a chessboard. A lot of guys take a big, deep breath thinking they made the team every year, and then they'll have a slew of moves depending on who they claim, if they claim anybody. Now, last year, they only claimed one guy, Khalif Halasi. So I don't know if they'll claim anybody or not. It seems like tight end, if there's somebody they really like to be a third tight end, in depth positions. But it is a juggling piece of information. Some of these wide receivers, I think, will be back on the practice squad. Wouldn't be surprised. Foreman's not claimed if they bring him back. Just a lot of different moving parts and pieces. But the most interesting is the most talked about is the quarterback. You got 4 of them.
Yeah, it seems like, the Foreman thing makes some sense as, he is a veteran. He's not subject to the waiver claims. It would make sense that they came to some sort of an agreement with him. We get the feeling that he will likely be back to this roster, right, in the next 24 hours at least. That's what we think. Jacob, first impressions.
I thought I was kind of surprised by all 5 safeties making it, and only 9 on the defensive line. And I know part of that goes into, Mike Hall going on the commissioner's exempt list. But all offseason, when I was trying to figure this out and making my 53, I didn't see Halasi and Bell both finding a way to sneak on there, and there being a total of 11 defensive backs with, the 6 and the 5. Not that I think he is a bad decision by any stretch of the imagination. Like maybe I would have kept Juwan Briggs over Bell or something like that. I don't know, but I think that the kind of numbers on the back end of that defense was just nothing crazy, just a little different than what I expected.
Yeah, I think we'll come back to this a little bit, but the one guy who's the kind of the odd man out there that I assumed was a lock all along, Jacob, to your point, was Justin Hardy as their special teams ace. Instead, you get Miles Harden and Halasi making it in the corner room. Now, Hardy is technically a veteran as well. Do they have plans for him? I don't know. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but that's another name that felt like he was a lock. Sam, first impressions.
Yeah, going along the lines of what Jacob was talking about. Again, this is a initial 53. It's not final 53. You know, the roster I think is going to look a lot different 2 weeks from now. But as of right now, we can kind of see where their priorities lie initially, which is in the secondary. At least it seems like they want the cover guys, right? So they kept Halasi and they kept Harden over Tony Brown and Justin Hardy, two guys who were signed primarily because of their special teams ability. And we saw them play corner quite a bit in the preseason, and they were not nearly as effective at corner as they are as gunners or on kickoff coverage, right? So
yes,
you're betting on Halasi and Harden being able to contribute more at their core positions of cornerback, which, to be fair, is not a bad bet considering the health concerns that both Ward and Newsome bring. And then Cam Mitchell has also been banged up as well. So I think they're kind of hedging their bets, at least right now. And this could be, irrelevant, obsolete 24 hours from now, right? But at least right now, it seems like they're a little bit concerned about the corner health. And that's why they've gone with, hey, we're going to keep more cover guys instead of the special teamers. And we're going to try to have guys like Bell, some of the linebackers, fill in that special teams gap.
Yeah, very good, Sam. I agree. It's I think it's definitely interesting. Part of this is the cornerback room, and will it stay as is? I can't imagine. I don't think anybody there. Obviously, you're worried about Denzel in protocol. You don't know. I don't know how far along Greg Newsome is. He's apparently made a remarkable recovery as he's out on the field and whatnot. So, and you've got, the injury history there with both of them. So, I think good points there. Pete, first impressions on this. You called the two tight ends. You think that's final? What other thoughts do you have?
You're muted, Pete.
I don't think they will add another tight end. I don't see the point. They can just use a lineman. They can just use a wide receiver.
Yeah.
My initial impressions are they're not done. There are guys who are currently on the roster that I don't think will be on the roster or may not be on the roster beyond the quarterback. I think they're going to make multiple waiver claims. They typically do.
Okay.
And there are a couple guys who stand out as designated survivors, which is they've done this a couple of years. The Browns have a tradition of cutting a veteran with a non-guaranteed salary and then re-signing him. They did it way back when with Greg Robinson, of all people. They did it with Michael Dunn last year. They've done this every year. They may do it with multiple people this time. Justin Hardy may be in that camp, but it's not the end of the world if they don't keep him. He's got like $600,000 guaranteed or something. But Foreman stood as a candidate immediately because there was no guaranteed money. Now, initially, when we saw that contract, we were thinking, oh, they're going to draft somebody and then may get rid of him. At this point, I would expect him back, but I'm still not sure what people see in Pierre Strong. So I could see somebody being claimed and ultimately waiving him. The Juwan Briggs thing is a mild surprise, I suppose. But the thing I've been talking about for a while is I think they need somebody else to two-gap. So if they are doing that to claim somebody, then it makes all the sense in the world. I think they're going to carry 10 ultimately. Now, they will have to figure this out whenever Hall returns from the commissioner's exempt list, but they got this nice little little bubble they get to use for an extra roster spot, which is nice. 6 linebackers is way too many. I don't know why we're doing this. I'm hoping that that's going to be remedied and they get rid of one of them. I'm looking at Devin Bush, but we'll see. I just don't see enough use for them, even with special teams evolving sort of, but ultimately they're not done. I think we're going to see more stuff. And they basically protected the 53 guys that have the most value, not necessarily the best 53 guys for them. Now it's a question of, are they going to be able to get a buyer for Huntley? Are they going to get a buyer for one of the corners? Are they going to get a buyer for one of these sort of extraneous pieces that they sort of held on to? You know, at some point when Hall is back, for example, and I've been highlighting this all along, they're going to have to figure out what they're doing with Maurice Hurst. They've got a whole lot of guys who do this one thing, and it can be very good. Like against Dallas, the first week of the season, a team that does not look capable of running the football much, it may be great if you've got all these guys who can rush the passer. But as you go on and you face off against more teams who are capable of running, they're going to need somebody other than Dalvin Tomlinson who can really get in there and run block. You're going to be facing off against 350-pound or 370-pound guards, as the case may be, in Ben Cleveland. And the Steelers are going to run the ball every play, I think, given what I've seen both from the quarterback and their pass protection. So they've got some issues to sort of work out.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to mention a couple things, ask you guys some questions, go around, but the chat is kind of talking about Foreman here, and I just want to kind of lay this out and kind of clear it up a little bit. Everybody kind of freaking out about that. To what Pete said, and I think a couple of us alluded to it, Foreman is a veteran who is not subject to waiver claims, right? So when he is cut, he does not, nobody can go out and claim him. They would have to sign him as a free agent. So for Foreman, it would make a lot of sense, and we've heard some rumblings about this, that the Browns would bring him back. So he would be there, as Pete said, their designated guy that they would bring back to the roster, that they just kind of cut to make room for that fourth quarterback or for some other maneuverability. I fully expect to find him back on the roster. Does anybody think that's wrong here?
No, I would just be flabbergasted. You know, unless there's somebody somewhere that got cut or waived, or maybe it's a trade that they think is like they can't pass up on. And I don't think there is. But outside of something crazy like that, I would be really shocked.
Daniel Oyefusi, I hope I said that right. Something like that, right? Yeah, I butchered it. I know. I'm sorry. Sorry, Daniel. Didn't see, he noticed it, and I'm sure you noticed this too, Fred. So I want to come to you. Didn't see out at practice today Jed Wills, David Bell, Maurice Hurst, Nathaniel Watson, and Denzel Ward. The first two that I zoom in on immediately are David Bell and Nathaniel Watson, because they made the 53. Are either of these guys, and maybe you guys know, here's my question. I've been asking it to a bunch of people. Nobody's really answered this. Do you think either of these guys get pushed to the IR?
Well, they're so forthcoming with injury information. You know, we were told David Bell would be out 1 to 2 weeks, it's been 2 weeks. When I was doing my roster thing, I just didn't know he seemed to be, with the game Mike Woods had, I thought, well, they'll put Woods on the roster and it's an easy way out to put Bell on IR. But then I switched it and I kept Bell on the roster, and that's what they did. He's not practicing. They got a lot of them back. I haven't heard anything about Nathaniel Watson having an injury. I didn't even know he wasn't out there. Ward's still in the protocol. They're not really saying anybody's long term. Now, Jed Wills, the strange thing is he cleared a physical, meaning he can practice, but yet he didn't practice. So one of the first questions we asked Stefanski, why did he get cleared to practice but didn't practice? And he said, well, he's going through the walkthroughs and he's progressing. So I have to think they still think he can play maybe in the first game, or maybe they're just on purpose holding him back to let Conklin see if he can play left tackle. I don't know. But, yeah, you really don't know till the dust settles and some of these moves are made. But I'm not getting the vibe there's anybody that's – I didn't know Michael Dunn. I don't even know what his thing was, a non-football illness. I don't know if he has COVID or what, but they put him on designated for return. So I don't know if that's one of the two you're allowed. They didn't, or if that's a
Yes.
completely different deal. But keep an eye on Nyheim Hines at running back. Stefanski keeps alluding that as soon as possible he's going to be out there, but he doesn't really give any specifics. I have to think that's the big piece for the return game. That's what they were counting on, and they don't have to play the games with bringing Prochet up from the practice team or Jalen Darden or any of those guys they might bring back. So, yeah, it's a lot to be determined, and like you don't know until they make a move, and then that speaks volumes. And so I thought today, but the other thing with Wills is they didn't obviously want him to miss 4 games.
Correct.
It might be 3 games, it might be 2, it might be 1, it might be none.
So the interesting thing there is Nyheim Hines on the non-football injury designated for return. He has to miss 4 weeks now, is my understanding, right? So Hines will miss 4 weeks, Chubb will miss 4 weeks, and Dunn will miss 4 weeks. That's my understanding on all 3 of those guys designated for return. So that's I believe that's correct. Pete, any thoughts on these? You think anybody else goes to IR here?
Difficult to say. It's certainly a scam. I mean, thing the Browns have done in the past that has afforded them extra flexibility. That would be really fascinating if they used COVID as an excuse to hide Michael Dunn for a month. So they've got all kinds of mechanisms. The Browns will use everything they can do to sort of hide guys, extend guys, and keep guys around. I mean, like I said earlier, the fact that, it's obviously disappointing from the standpoint of, yes, they want Michael Hall to get reps, but it probably doesn't hurt their feelings this much right this second to have him on the commissioner's exempt list, because it allows them to hold somebody else on the roster, even if it's only for a week or so, because then they can sort of, everybody else's roster has a chance to sort of maybe settle down, and then maybe they can get somebody to the practice squad or something along those lines. The one thing that does interest me, the possibility of who could potentially replace Deontay Foreman. I don't think it will happen. The Broncos did release Samaje Perine, which I found interesting.
Yeah.
And again, it may be the same thing the Browns are doing. But he at least fits that mold of big back who can catch passes. And certainly that seems to be something that the Browns are interested in. But the fact that Nyheim Hines and Chubb will be out for 4 weeks is why I think they will be attacking that waiver wire and seeing if they can find somebody else they want to bring in. Again, maybe they like Pierre Strong a whole lot more than I do, but I have to think they're tempted by something they see out there.
I have Pierre Strong kind of earmarked, and we'll go around, guys, and I want to ask this question to you. So knowing what we know, knowing that, are kind of guys that I have marked as potentially coming back, interestingly enough, as veterans, are Hardy and Foreman, who I think is most surely coming back, at least in my opinion. But who on the roster now do you think could end up not on the roster at all end of day tomorrow? I have a couple names in mind. Let's go around and see what you guys think. Start with you, Jacob. Do you have anybody that you think that could end up, they're safe now, but they make a claim and another move, and somehow they end up not on the 53 tomorrow?
I'm really surprised Tony Fields made it. That's not really a name that and I get the special teams aspect and things like that, but that's just, they got hurt, missed a lot of time. And then Pete even said it, 6 linebackers doesn't make a ton of sense for me either. And so I kind of wonder, cause a guy like Jermaine Ifedi is not on the list. Are you going to try to bring him back or something along those lines? I mean, I'm with probably Pierre Strong, but if I had to pick one, I just don't know what Tony Fields can do as a linebacker that you can't get from the other guys on this roster. Like I just special teams, sure, but I mean you're at that point in this roster construction that I don't really want to burn a lot of roster spots on guys that can only do that.
I tend to agree with you. The only problem there, I would just push. The only pushback I would give to that, Jacob, is Tarver. He's Tarver's guy. Tarver loves him. He's always talked him up coming into camp. Now, has that changed? I don't know. Pete, you have said you think that the odd guy out. Like I agree. I don't think there should be 6 linebackers on this team. You think the odd guy out would be Devin Bush, right, Pete?
Yeah, Jason Tarver has continued to talk about Tony Fields as his fourth guy.
Yeah,
and I think he's really happy with his development. Now we'll see. He's been in a walking boot for I don't know how long. That could change things. Devin Bush, I like Mahmoud Diabate better than Devin Bush and everything I've seen. He's younger.
yeah.
He's a little bit more willing to get fight through trash and do some of those things. He's got a lot of special teams experience. Devin Bush did get a lot of special teams reps in preseason, so maybe that's a factor. But in terms of reps in this system and on special teams, Diabate's got more of them. I'm not entirely sure Javion Cohen's going to make it. I think the Browns really like him, but I do wonder if they're going to try to sort of casually get him onto the practice squad. And then, I could see them again. Maurice Hurst is the one that jumps out at me in some form or fashion. It may take a little bit. One of the quarterbacks is going. I assume it's going to be Tyler Snoop Huntley. At some point is going away. And then I think the only caveat with the linebacker thing is Nathaniel Watson's leg injury the one that's going to land him on short-term IR. If it is, then they probably need to get somebody who fits a Sam linebacker type role at on the practice squad, because the Browns have been an aggressive team at using the practice squad to help them out at linebacker. And the way the NFL has changed their rules makes it even easier to do that, since you don't have, if you activate a player 3 times, you don't then waive them. You can they just stand there the whole time. So those are the guys that sort of jump out at me beyond Pierre Strong, that I think could end up being gone at some point.
Sam, I'm coming to you. I just want to tell everybody thank you for watching the OBR streaming network. This is the 53 React. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. It just takes a second. It helps us out a ton. Just go down there, click those buttons twice, hit the notification bell so you know every time we go live. If you're watching over on Twitter, hop on over to youtube.com/Orange and Brown Report. Or if you're over on Twitch, we already appreciate you so much. So thank you all. But just take a second and do that for us. It helps us dearly. Sam, any thoughts on guys that might not be back? And then at the same time, and I'll send this to you too, Fred, is there any strategy to keeping a guy for one day? Like, is he any more protected if you held on to him for one day to get through this first round of claims to get through the second round? Like, does he sneak through? Like, do you know what I mean? Like a Cohen. Like, if you held him, protected him for one day, and then you tried to sneak him through to your practice squad the second day, is there anything to that? 2-part question. Sorry.
Yeah, I would say, as far as the player who might not be here, Cohen would be my guess, just because I think they'll replace him with Dunn. I think they like him long term, but for now, I think Dunn gives you more. He's more versatile. He's more proven. Knows the system already as much as you can. So that's mine. And then as far as if it provides you extra protection, I think it does, because the majority of the waiver claims are going to be in this first round, right? And then there'll be some players who were claimed, and then there'll be another round of cuts. And that second round will be less players, and those teams that are interested in some of those players from the second round of cuts, in this scenario, Cohen, they'll have already made claims on some other players. So they'll have acquired guys who they may be more reluctant to immediately cut in order to claim somebody like Cohen. So I would say it does provide them some extra protection, and it increases the likelihood of them being able to hide someone like Cohen and get him back on the practice squad. That's how I see it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think of it that way, but it's a really good point, Sam. Thank you, Fred. Anybody you think that doesn't survive through tomorrow, anybody that you think they might be going positional wise, might be putting a claim in on.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about all along. Until they got Nick Harris, I think he solves a lot of problems, as Pete talked about. I had him in my projection, just 2 tight ends, and I don't really see why they need a third one, because last year Nick Harris was basically your backup center, best backup guard, and your fullback, H-back, and other than catching passes, you don't really need, he can do all those things. So they may not add a third tight end unless they do it to the practice squad. But I think the linebacker position is devalued as it is. They don't make it a priority. I think Bush or Fields, one of those would be guys that they would move on from. If there is something with Watson, I would have thought they would have put him on the IR today, but maybe they think it'll linger a little bit. But Cohen's the other one. I think I had the Browns keeping Cohen on the roster just because of thinking that Dunn would make it through waivers more so than Cohen, because Dunn's been on waivers on and off for 3 or 4 years. And so that's how they look at it. So I kind of the same thing these other guys have said. I guess they really like James Hudson, but it seemed like that would have been a guy you could move on from, but they didn't move on from him today. Maybe they'll bring somebody back and move on from him. I don't know if Jed Wills is ready to go, but it's hard to know, until they make moves, but there's a reason for everything. I'm going to hop off, guys. It's been a long day in Berea. I just got home and I got to get out there again tomorrow, but good being with you. Thanks for everybody watching.
Thank you for stopping by, Fred. Make sure you go follow Fred on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, at Fred Greetham9, the legend. We appreciate you, sir.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks to Fred for stopping by. Long day out at camp and, listening to all the press conference and stuff. All right. So the guy that jumps out to me is Pierre Strong, right? Like, I didn't think he would be on this roster. I said multiple times, and Larry in the chat right now is the one who's been touting him to me, and so he's probably going to point this out. But I said, as long as Nyheim Hines is healthy, there's no way that he makes the roster. I still didn't think he would make the roster, but here he is. I do think it's possible that they land a claim on a running back, bring back Foreman and the claimed running back, and then he ends up not on the 53 tomorrow. Is that a feasible outcome for you, Jacob?
Yeah, I think so, because one thing that's really interesting is when you look at this, is they're, even when bringing Foreman back, is looking for that kind of third down pass catcher that Nyheim Hines is. Like, that was something that was really big to me when they signed him. Yeah, the return stuff's really awesome, but like, you can line him in the slot. You can do some of those things with Hines that you did with Kareem Hunt, a few years back. And so, like, P. Ryan is I didn't realize he got waived. Like, that is very interesting. But yeah, that would make sense. Get a guy like P. Ryan, somebody that can do some of that stuff Hines was going to do on third downs, and bring Foreman back. And in that situation, there's no room for Pierre Strong. I guess he's got some return ability if you really want to keep him around from that. But like, I mean, a nice brisk wind will just knock him over. And I just don't, I mean, if he's the fourth guy, sure. But like, I'm not, that would be a really nice scenario. Claim one and bring Foreman back. I could see that happening.
I don't see any reasoning for this, but I am surprised that James Hudson made it over a Fitty or whatever. I thought that he was going to be better as an emergency left tackle if you needed one. Sam, do you have any thoughts on that? And Sam, what positions would you be putting in claims here? Like, what do they need to add to this roster that's not here? And how are they positioned to, bring somebody in? Or where do you see that at?
Well, as far as Affetti versus Hudson, I mean, I think Hudson was clearly better than Affetti during the preseason, so I think that's probably why they ended up going that route. And I think, Hudson's game film and his track record there in the regular season is not great, but it's better than Affetti still, unfortunately. And you can make the argument that Affetti is a more talented player, first-round pick and everything, but experience is experience, and they know if they have in Hudson for the most part. So I think they're more comfortable with that. As far as claims go, I do expect them to make a claim or two and put some in. I think somebody like P. Ryan makes sense. I think as far as his skill set and he just seems like the kind of back. He's always whenever he's gotten a chance, he's been productive. And like Jacob said, he's versatile. He can do different things. He catches the ball well. I think he'd be a good fit here. I don't know that they'll be in a great position to make some claims on some of these younger guys who are going to be subject to waivers, because they only made one claim last year, right? Halasi, and they were, I don't know how many spots higher they were last year, but they were in a better waiver situation last year than they were this year, or than they are this year. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult. I know our old buddy Blake Hance got cut by the Jaguars. So if they were looking for a tackle who has guard experience as well, started in a playoff game, that could be a thing. And then the Vikings also cut Lewis Seen, first-round pick safety. I know he's been banged up like his entire career. I'm sure there's other things going on there that they would just move on from him so quickly. But he's extremely talented. He's extremely athletic. He had a really good game against the Browns in the preseason. So as far as like a fifth safety, I would be interested in seeing if they could land him just as like a reclamation project, throw him on special teams, let him see if he can figure it out here. Low risk, high reward, I feel like.
Good stuff, Sam. Jack McCurry pointing out in chat, Browns are 23rd in waiver order, so odds are slim. I would say yes and no. He also points out San Francisco cut Chris Hubbard today. If you really wanted to go back to that, I mean, he played swing here for a long time. So I'm going to go to you, Pete, next here with this, but there are, I think, once again, with these waiver wire stuff, beauty is in the eye of the beholder here. So I don't necessarily think that these teams, rushing to claim one or two guys. I think it's more about who fits our style, who I always talk about the little list that Andrew Berry has in his pocket at all times, 5 names at every position and every coach that he's ready to go to. And I feel like this is the time that he pulls that list out and says, all right, let's start kicking the tires on these guys. These are the guys that fit what we want. These are the guys, they already know, right? So, and that may not align with what other teams want. So I think you can get somebody maybe that you want at 23rd. But it is a little bit further down the line. Pete, how does this roster change? I saw you shaking your head at the idea of Chris Hubbard. Where are you making claims, and who's out of here if it was up to you?
So Chris Hubbard makes a lot of sense as a pass protector. He doesn't fit anything near what the Browns would do on the ground game anymore, unfortunately. I would not surprise me at all if he ends up in Tennessee with Bill Callahan. Yeah. One guy who jumps out at me that got waived that I would be interested, I don't know how the Browns feel about him, is Braden Daniels, tackle from Washington, played collegiately at Utah. I actually thought he was a better fit in guard, but whatever. I believe P. Ryan is a veteran. He can just be cut inside wherever he wants. And I think there's a couple nose tackles in that category that are older that would be clear, free and clear. I think Ridgeway I don't know who did the cutting of him, but Ridgeway is a guy that I think jumps out. One guy who's just I think still sitting out there available theoretically that was not released because he hasn't signed with anybody yet is Al Woods. But yeah, running back's interesting. I'm extraordinarily bitter at the Broncos because they kept both Audric Esteem and Blake Watson. I was counting on them to get rid of Watson, but they got rid of P. Ryan instead. But there are a bunch of running backs out there. Just there are always running backs, and like it's a position where you can sort of get away with it, of not sort of being super active early and then being able to pick somebody up. So that's a position that jumps out, and then. Just, I think for the most part, they're largely set. It's largely a question of if they're satisfied enough with what they have in a particular position. That's why defensive tackle jumps out at me because they have a lot of guys who do the same thing. Are they going to be content with that, or do they want to get that another guy who can come in and do the two gapping stuff other than Dalvin Tomlinson, because they're going to need it at some point. It's just a question of when.
Yeah, so to your point, they talked about doing more of the 3-tech shade nose stuff this year. Tomlinson had to have his knee scoped, and then Ika certainly didn't work out. So if they are still subscribing to doing more of that than they did last year, it would make sense that they are looking to add someone there. We mentioned Briggs earlier as a guy that got cut, or Jacob, I think, did, or Sam did. One of you guys did. Where are you guys at with the defensive tackle room? Do you think it stays as it is, Jacob, or do you think that that's where they're looking to add another nose?
Yeah, because I kind of, for the longest time, had defaulted Siaki Ika on this team because that was the one thing he was supposed to be able to do. I mean, he wasn't able to do that, but that was the one calling card was like, hey, this guy can eat up blocks. He can play run. Well, he should. He was supposed to be able to do those things. And so ultimately, I thought he was going to get the nod over Maurice Hurst, and then they move on, from Ika and Briggs. But yeah, because I like Dalvin Tomlinson coming off a knee scope. Shelby Harris can play the run. And then what? In terms of true blue, two gapping defensive line, who's going to do it? There's nobody else on this roster right now that is anywhere near their calling card on the inside. So Pete's right. They've got a ton of guys that can rush the passer from inside there. They no problems with the roster construction from that side of things. But yeah, they just got to find some depth that can go in there and rush and just clog up rushing lanes, because I don't want to see a repeat of 2 years ago, where if for whatever reason it's a close game in the fourth quarter and this offense is probably going to start off rusty. I mean, there's a lot of changes and a lot of people that haven't played a ton of snaps, and I think it'll just start a little slow. You could die by a death of 1,000 paper cuts in that fourth quarter with the way that defensive tackle room is against the run. And so you just got to find somebody else that can do something.
Yeah, Sam, when you look at this defensive line, 9 guys: Myles Garrett, Shelby Harris, Maurice Hurst, Quentin Jefferson, Isaiah McGuire, Ogbo Okoronkwo, Zadarius Smith, Dalvin Thompson, Alex Wright. They got plenty of guys that can play edge and kick inside, right? I mean, their versatility is crazy. Are you seeing a missing run stuffer there when you look at this roster?
No, because they have Nick Harris. He could probably swap sides and add a fourth position to his repertoire, right?
Why not?
I do see a need there. I don't know if they feel exactly the same way. I don't know that them moving on from Ika is an indicator either way, because I think that's just its own thing that doesn't have anything to do with how comfortable they feel about that role. Well, like Pete was saying, Al Woods is out there. John Ridgway just got cut. The other Ridgway, Hassan Ridgway, is out there. Lawrence Guy and Chris Wormley are some other free agent veterans that are out there who have have logged snaps. I think that somebody like Woods makes a lot of sense because like you know what you're getting from him. I know he's like 34, right? Yeah, no,
Prime those
37.
days.
He's 37. Yeah, so he's 5-10 snaps a game, if that, for him, if he's even active, depending on the matchup, right? So I think that makes sense because, like you guys are talking about, they don't have someone who can just stand there in two gap and stand their ground and not just get pushed around. Like the skill sets on the team right now are shoot the gap or win your man with your speed and your quickness, your pass rush moves, right? Aside from Tomlinson. But again, having one guy in that room, like I don't personally think that's enough, even in this modern, pass heavy age. I still think you need a guy who can stand in there and do that. And we've seen this for years and years and years. Like, this team will get gashed if you just run the ball right up the middle. And they've done everything from completely ignore that to invest a top 15 pick into Danny Shelton, and none of it's worked. So I think their best bet at this point is just to sign a veteran who's done it before and roll with mostly the group that you have now. And because like they're going to be totally fine in pass rush, right? I would venture to say that they have one of the most talented pass rushing groups in the NFL at defensive tackle, right? That's not going to be a problem. But if they're late in the game, like Jacob is saying, and it's a close game and the other team is running the ball, that's not what those guys are good at. And they're going to struggle. And the linebackers are not good at, taking on blocks and playing that, hard line in the box front seven game. Like they're speed guys, and they're at their best when those blocks are being occupied by the defensive line and the down linemen, especially the tackles, are doing their job, filling the roles responsibly. And I think that's what a guy like Woods can give you is 5-10 snaps a game. He's going to hold at his own at the point of attack. He's going to two gap. He's not going to get blown off the ball. He's not going to give you anything rushing the passer, but again, you don't need him to do that. You just need him to do his job and let the linebackers clean up, right? So that's the way I see it. But it'll be interesting to see if they end up putting in a claim for one of these guys that was waived or signing a veteran.
Yeah, not to mention, along with that, Tomlinson coming off the knee scope. I mean, how many snaps is he going to be able to play? Is he going to have trouble coming back? You like to at least have somebody there besides him who can kind of do a similar thing. All right, let's talk quarterbacks real quickly. So they keep the 4 quarterbacks. Pete, they're gonna try to shop. According to reports, they're shopping Winston and Huntley. Are you buying Winston at all? Because I'm not. And do you think they'll find a deal for Huntley?
As far as Winston goes, I think it's more other teams are calling the Browns, and the Browns are like, do more. I don't think the Browns are calling up other teams and saying, "Here's Jameis Winston. What do you give for it?" I no different than I think the DTR situation. I think teams were calling the Browns, and they weren't offering enough. But Tyler Huntley, I do think there's a chance he's going to get moved to a team because there are a lot of teams with nothing at backup quarterback. The Chargers immediately stand out. Justin Herbert's been dealing with a foot issue and whatever else, and I think Easton Stick is the only guy on their roster currently. They have Huntley's former offensive coordinator and Greg Roman. That they stand out. The Ravens need not that I expect the Browns would. Not to expect the Ravens are likely to try to trade within the division, but if it's for a 7th round pick, who cares? But there are multiple teams out there that just don't have anything and don't want to leave it to chance. Huntley, if he's released, I believe is a vested veteran, can go wherever he wants. And that's the other part. If you trade for him, you get him at the nothing contract the Browns signed him for. If you release and he's got a market, you may need to pay more for him. I don't expect it would be a huge amount, but whatever. I think it's Nathan Segura is like sort of, I don't want to say begging, but trying to sell hard the idea of getting Huntley is you don't want to be out. You don't want to be in a situation where you are at the mercy of Huntley's interests. You can sort of lock that up. And the Browns have got a lot more for Josh Dobbs. Why not for Huntley? So that part I think is perfectly within the realm of possibility, just because there are, there just aren't enough quarterbacks to go around. And, obviously everybody's, from our perspective, everybody remembers the Browns played 5 quarterbacks, but almost every team in the league had somebody else play at some point. It wasn't, there weren't a whole lot of guys who played 17 games. So at some point you're going to need somebody to come in. You might as well get somebody you like better than what you currently have. If that's not satisfactory enough, give up what you need to give up to go get somebody like Huntley.
Yeah.
7th round pick swap for a Pro Bowler. Like, you can't beat it.
This is true.
Pro Bowler, big asterisks. Jacob, quarterback situation. Did you take the Winston thing seriously? And Tyler Huntley?
Yeah, I don't. I'm with Pete. I don't think they're shopping him around, but I'm sure a lot of people would like to have Jameis Winston right now because I know I'm really happy to have him. So I'm sure other situations people are, he'd be great behind Justin Herbert. I mean, a lot better than Easton Stick. And I'm just saying, like, just in comparison. But no, I don't really buy that side of it. They would have to just be blown away, I think. I mean, everybody's got a price, so I'm sure if like somebody called them up with just something absolutely off the charts, they might think about it. But yeah, I think Tyler Huntley's better than some of those guys. Like, and Pete's talking about the money side of it is a great point. I mean, you don't want to spend a ton of money on one position that only plays one player in quarterback. You don't want to. I know some people are paying premium for backup, but if you're looking for the third or fourth option that you've had, you don't want to practically nothing's better than a veteran minimum salary that's guaranteed, or however it works if it gets bet up, right, if he has a market and it goes up. So I think there's a market for him. We'll find out pretty quickly, but I mean, it's probably a 7th round pick, and it's like, okay, a guy you signed late got you another asset. So I don't buy much into the Jameis Winston thing, but Huntley's gone one way or another, I think.
Sam, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would agree with Pete and Jacob. If a team is going to offer a 3rd round pick for Winston, then sure, we'll go with that. If not, then we'll be fine with Winston and DTR, and you can have Huntley for a 7th round swap. Like, I don't think they're not in a desperate situation where, like, oh my goodness, we have to trade one of these guys. Like, I think clearly the fact that they kept all 4 means that they are pretty confident they're going to get an offer that they like for one of them.
Yeah.
And I think that whether it ends up being Winston and DTR or DTR and Huntley, I think they're going to be okay with that backup QB room. That said, the injury history with the starter is concerning, and they have to be prepared for that, which is why I think they were so interested in taking DTR 2 years ago, developing him to the point where he is now, where clearly he's showing improvement and looking like a guy who can start and win games for you at some point in the future. And then you have that in Winston immediately. So I think they're okay either way, however that ends up going.
I gotta admit, I would kind of be furious if they got rid of Winston at this point, just because of the injury history. And yeah, I do think DTR has a ceiling and is coming along, but Winston feels like a guy that can win games for you in a short term if it's 3-4 games in a row, he feels like he can keep you in games. And I would be more confident in him. Plus the factor that he's playing for the culture, I feel like he is impacting the culture here. So, and I don't want to make that. I know that's a buzzword or whatever, but I do think he impacts the culture here a good deal, and I think he's good for Deshaun Watson. So, just a couple thoughts there. All right, there are some of all of the cuts today. There were some notable ones, which we'll bring up here on the screen. I believe, and take a look at the most notable cuts today, which would have been Jawan Briggs, Ika, Ifedi, Michael Woods. I'm sure people want to talk about Mikey Trees, as Casey would say, and Isaiah Thomas, right? So we've got those guys here. Pete, of these guys, any of them practice squad? All of them practice squad? Any of them 53? Thoughts here?
Well, I think the Browns would love to have all of them back on the practice squad. I just don't know how realistic that is. I think Michael Woods is more realistic than some people think. After the Steelers put in about 35 waiver claims on wide receivers, I think Michael Woods is still going to be available. So that's I think he may be back. Isaiah Thomas is tricky. I would not be surprised if there's a team that needs more edge depth. And Jawan Briggs may be tricky as well. But you never know. I mean, what is it, 2% or whatever is the number of these things that actually happen. I don't expect Ifedi's getting picked up. Ika, I would pick him up if I was another team. If I was a team that was going nowhere, and just put him on the back of the roster. But if people determine that roster space is just too valuable, then who knows? I mean, he is awful right now, and I do think he is salvageable if he's willing to doing the things to make it work. But right now, he's unplayable. So if you're a team that can afford a guy who's unplayable, then he's sort of the guy to bet on. But I wouldn't rule out the possibility that all these guys are back.
There are a number of defensive tackles that have just hung around this league and changed their body over years, and by the time that they're close to 30, they're pretty decent defensive tackles. So Ika's career isn't necessarily over if he can get somebody to buy into giving him a chance, I think. When you look at this list, what do you think, Sam?
Yeah, again, like Pete said, I think they would like to have everyone back. And again, like 4 or 5 years ago, I don't think they would have cut Ika. I think that they moved on from him because they couldn't afford to roster a guy who wasn't going to contribute, regardless of how much they invested in him or how much they think he's talented. Back when they were trying to get to the point where they were competing for playoffs instead of where they are now, I think it would have made a lot more sense to keep him around, let him go through the growing pains. Because I think he came in like 360 and he's down in the 330s now. So he's done the work to, cut down some of that weight. It's just he needs to get a lot stronger, and show that he's an NFL player, which he hasn't done to this point. But again, like you're saying, it's not a death sentence to his career. It just means right now there's no spot for him in Cleveland. Like they took him hoping he would be able to figure it out within a year, and that didn't happen. And that's okay. Like, yeah, it's disappointing to move on from a 3rd round pick, a year later, but 3rd round picks, if you really look at the track record, like it's not a high hit rate. So yeah, at the time you could have said like, well, there are issues with him as a player. You could have gone some other routes, but it's at least an understandable pick. And it's not one that I'm going to, get up in arms about them missing on. And maybe he comes back to the practice squad. I think that's probably their ideal scenario is, hey, let's keep this guy around for another year, see if he can put in the work and compete for a spot next year. But again, like Pete's saying, if I'm a different team who isn't going to be competing this year, I'm putting a claim in on him, and I'm going to be playing him like a lot, just seeing what he can do and seeing if he can make any improvement for me. Because I think the juice is worth the squeeze with him for a team that isn't competing for a Super Bowl.
If you're another team, Sam, would you rather put a claim in on Ika or Briggs?
I would say Ika, because I think Ika has a higher ceiling than Briggs does, just as far as physical talent. But if you're looking for instant impact, either way, you're not thrilled about the situation you're in if one of these two guys is going to be contributing for you. But Briggs, I think, is clearly the better player right now.
Okay. Fair. Jacob, same stuff for you if you could put a claim in on one. And then also, do you think Michael Woods, Isaiah Thomas are guys that can make it back, or do you expect to see them claimed?
Yeah, I think what Sam said makes a lot of sense between Ika and Briggs, because one thing I go back to with Ika is not his 2022 tape, but his 2021 tape at Baylor was good. Like he was an impactful player for them, and then took a massive step backwards in his last season with Baylor before the Browns drafted him. So I've seen him be good. I have seen that, and I've seen him be better than what I've seen from Briggs in college. And so, yeah, I mean, if you've got I was talking to Casey Kinnaman today, and he brought up, not to compare the two players, but he brought up he had to go through a lot of growing pains with Cam Hayward when he first came into the league. And he had to go through some of these things, and they were able to stick the course, and now he is what he is. So maybe Ika goes through those things and is a serviceable player. He's certainly shown flashes of it in college. So if I'm a bad team, yeah, I'm probably taking him. I wouldn't lose my mind if Ika was on the practice squad. I would not, I don't want him on the active roster. I really don't want him playing on Sundays, but if you're going to bring him around and kind of stash him to grow, I don't think it's the end of the world. I have a lot of hard times. Isaiah Thomas is probably the one that I think would be the hardest to get back. And that's just because of the guys that shined in the preseason, and I know it's the preseason, but Isaiah Thomas, he showed he's got some juice. I mean, there were some really nice reps and some at the beginning of games against some of the better players that you will see in the preseason. I just thought he just jumped off the tape several different times, and I thought, this is a guy that's a rosterable player, and so I would love to have him back, but I think you're safe. You can probably get Mike Woods back, but I think if you're trying to get Isaiah Thomas back, I think that one's going to be a little difficult.
Yeah. Good stuff. You're watching the 53 React show here on reaction to the Browns' first 53 cut here on the OBR streaming network. Go ahead and hit like and subscribe. If you're joining us here tonight, we appreciate 668 of you hanging out with us here to go over this stuff. Remember, this is not the final 53. There's much to go on tomorrow. Waiver claims. They could assign someone an injury designation. We don't know yet. I do want to revisit real quickly before we get out of here, as we go over an hour here. But I do want to revisit from earlier the Justin Hardy thing, because I had this conversation with Pete, and I kind of said in the post-game show, after it was late at night after the Seattle game, right? And we were talking about the roster, and my point was kind of at this point with the kickoff the way it is, right? The change in the kickoff rules, can you afford to just have a special teams ace anymore? Aren't the spots on the 53 too valuable to do that? Isn't having Harden and Halasi more valuable to you than having a guy that can be a special teams ace but can't cover worth a lick? And so here we end up with Harden and Halasi on the roster and no Hardy. But it makes me wonder, because then I'm staring at Pierre Strong And Larry's in the chat saying the only reason he's there is to return kicks. I don't know if the Browns view it that way, but if you view Hardy one way, I mean, do you view Strong the same way? It's kind of why I think Strong has a chance to not be here in the end. Certainly when Hines comes back, I don't think he'll be on this 53 anymore. But I just want to hear your guys' thoughts on, do you think Hardy ends up on this 53, or is this just a realization they made that they value kind of what Sam said earlier? They value the cover guys more. And final thoughts on the running back room seem kind of be the 2 points here of contention as we go into tomorrow. And any other final thoughts you want to throw my way? Go ahead, Jacob.
I mean, I said it earlier about Tony Fields. I just don't know that you can afford that. Like, I know I've heard everybody kind of say this offseason, but like, I'm pretty over watching people like Mike Ford play corner. Like, although I think Mike Ford was probably an exception. He was a little bit better than some of these other special teams players, but like guys that you're bringing in to play special teams having to play on defense, it keeps happening. Like, I can't think of a situation in the last couple of years where you brought a special teamer on that didn't at some point get thrust into playing defense.
Totally agree.
And it was bad when they did. And it's just I like Hardy. I mean, he's a local kid. He's the guy that, told Flacco to go win a Super Bowl. And that was a really cool moment. And like, he's a Pro Bowl special teamer, but I just think we're past that as a roster. Like, and that just, you're at the point where everybody needs to be able to play their position. And their position can't just be special teams, because I think it's just, you don't have room for that anymore. And I think you kind of saw that a little bit with some of the moves they made today. And I know that it's just the initial 53 and not the final, but I think we're kind of past that. Because like even Nyheim Hines, heck of a third down back, heck of a pass catcher, like, so there he can do both. But yeah, I'm not sure there's room for that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I couldn't agree more. But also, last year they had, a corner that they did this with, and they had a linebacker who was just a special teams ace, right? They had two guys last year that, So, Sam, thoughts on the same thing? I know you kind of already hit on this, but maybe elaborate more. And any other thoughts you want to make on the roster here, before we get out of here tonight? Anything you want to get off your chest or talk about?
Well, we missed Tavier Thomas becoming a legitimately good slot corner by a year. Like, he was great special teamer for us, then goes to Houston. It's like, whoa, where'd this guy come from? Because he was forced into playing slot for the Browns, and he did not do well. And he looked like a totally different player with the Texans. So good for him. Especially could have happened a year earlier, right?
Yeah, it's a good point.
As far as having specific special teamers, I think it comes down to a lot of how much do you trust your coaches, because Ventrone is going to say like, yes, I need this guy and I need this guy, and he had two last year, right? He had two guys who were like, all right, this is your player. They're not going to contribute on defense ideally at all, but this is your guy. They're specifically on the roster to play special teams because you think they're really good. And typically they were. Like, Matt Adams was really good for the Browns last year. He's a great special teamer. However, those guys are on the field for 10, 15 plays a game versus 50, 60, 70 as a defender. And I think you can make the argument those are more impactful snaps than special teams. That said, you never really think about special teamers being important until your team blows a play and you lose the game because you gave up a punt return touchdown because your gunner just absolutely blew his assignment. So it is valuable to have guys like Hardy where you're like, yeah, I know he's going to do his job really well. I can count on him every snap that he plays on special teams. He's going to do his job. Again, is it realistic even for the the all-pro special teamers to do their job perfectly on every play? No. I don't think that you need necessarily an elite special teams unit. You just need one that is going to avoid big plays given up, right? You don't need
Disaster.
that's going to, like, I'll take preventing kickoff return touchdowns and 40, 50-yard returns, even if that means I don't get those, right? Like, all else being even, if we can come out equal on special teams, the way that I think the philosophy is our offense is going to be better than yours and our defense is going to be better than yours. If we can just have an equal special teams unit, we're going to win the game. And does that mean that you need one or two guys who are specifically for special teams? I'm not sure. I think that the special teams coordinator probably feels that way. But does the front office specifically agree with that this year? I know they have in the past, but it'll be interesting to see if they end up if they end up bringing back Hardy, then we'll have our answer, but I'm not sure. Then the same thing goes with the running backs, right? I don't think that Strong gives you enough as a runner to justify keeping him on the team as the returner, because I don't think his ability as a returner outweighs that, right? I don't necessarily think he's, like, when I think of, the top 10 returners in the league, like, Strong's probably not going to be on that list. And because of that, I don't know that he gives you enough as a returner to justify keeping on the roster as a running back, because ideally he's never going to get the ball as a running back, right? Foreman's going to be more effective. Ford's going to be more effective. Hines is going to be more effective when he comes back and replaces Strong. P. Ryan, any of these other guys we're talking about. So that's how I see it, but we'll see how the front office views that issue over the next 24 hours probably.
Well said, Sam Penix. Pete Smith, thoughts on the same thing, and anything else you wanted to hit on tonight, before we get out of here?
Yes, I think you can designate a roster spot for special teams. You're paying $4 million for a kicker now to do nothing but special teams. I don't separate a guy like Justin Hardy if he brings that much of an impact. If you're talking about 10 to 15 snaps a game, that is probably more snaps on that, over the course of a season. That's going to be more snaps than that last line of defense corner is going to play. So that has more value. It's going to impact the game more often. It can change the game. The Browns have, the now slandered Tony Fields won a football game for this team, largely on special teams by himself. So yeah, clearly there's a value there. I'll be curious to see. I'm not sure what they're going to do, but it certainly makes sense if they plan to bring Hardy back. I think if they told him, look, we're going to get this sorted out and bring you back, he seems more than game to do that, given how passionate he is and how excited he is to be here. So I don't think would take much arm twisting for him for that to sort itself out. And it may be a situation where they're not entirely sure, just how ready they are at slot corner with who they have there. Are they going to be content with what they have with Greg Newsome coming off the hamstring injury, or are they going to sort of wait this thing out and maybe determine, let's wait a little bit, and that may change your depth chart. That may change how you look at it. Khalif Halassi is certainly interesting as a press corner, in the same mold as Martin Emerson, albeit much smaller, but similar athletic skill set. But yeah, running back's the one I keep looking at in terms of, is there going to be a trade or something along those lines where you're going to see something brought in to bolster that position because you have that flexibility. And then, continuing is just knows. What are they going to do? Are they content with this? Are we going to see another move? I expect we're going to see another move. I think they want to consistently have 10 defensive linemen anyway. So we'll see how that shakes out. Currently 9 with the roster exemption. So that's an easy way for them to sort of add and continue to get better. And then we'll see what happens with linebacker. I suspect they get down to 5.
Yeah, just to answer that same question, was going to be my last question. Do they end up with 6 or 5 linebackers, Jacob?
I think it's 5. I just they're not going to play very many of them. Like, I would say 5. That's where I would make a cut to bring someone else back. If you're trying to bring in a nose or something like that, that's probably where I would take from.
And your odd man out is Fields?
I mean, you kind of convinced me to change my tone, Pete, but probably if I had to bet, I'll stick with it.
Sam, 5 or 6 linebackers.
I think if Fields is going to be the designated special teamer, then I think they'd be good with 5 because he's shown he can at least contribute on defense. And if Ventrone loves him as a special teamer, then you can get away with 5. I don't know that. I think Devin Bush is talented. I think he can give you some playable depth, but I don't know that he contributes if everyone's healthy. So I think that they would be better off with 5.
Yeah, I tend to agree. This roster is certainly not complete. The Browns' initial 53-man roster, 4 quarterbacks, 2 running backs. There's, questions around David Bell's health. There's questions around Nathaniel Watson's health. There's questions around, what they will do with linebacker. Do they need an additional nose tackle? We've addressed all this stuff for you guys tonight here on the show. Who will they potentially make a waiver claim on? Who could not end up on this roster? We've hit it A to Z all the way through, up and down, like we always do here at the OBR Streaming Network. Hope you appreciated the time and enjoyed the show. Any real quick parting words around the horn? Anything to say before we go, Jacob?
Just buckle up. It's not done.
Sam?
Yeah. Interesting to see what the next 24 hours hold.
Pete?
Just stay tuned to the OBR. There's going to be plenty more coverage on this. We'll have shows tomorrow. We'll have shows Thursday, in addition to just everything going on the website that's going to be covering this and everything. The fun for the Dallas Cowboys, because that is they've got a small break here, but then they, we're going to be preparing for a game, the actual start of the season.
Yes, sir. Can't wait. Thank you guys all for tuning in. Keep it locked at the OBR 24/7. We'll be writing on everything, talking everything. Join us tomorrow night for OBR Weekly and the React. We appreciate you all. Hit like and subscribe on your way out. For Jacob Roach, Sam Penix, and Pete Smith, my name is Brad Ward. We're out of here.